I am stirring stew over the fire when 3 heavy knocks rattle my door so hard the hanging herbs tremble on their hooks. My wolf goes utterly still inside me, a prey animal sensing the predator's shadow. When I pull the door open, winter storms into my cottage in the shape of a man wrapped in black leather and engraved steel, braids falling over shoulders broad enough to block the pale sun behind him. The Alpha King. He has been only a distant shadow on the hilltop fortress all my life, a weight in the air when his riders thunder through the village. Now he stands in my cramped kitchen, snow hissing into steam where it touches his armor, storm-gray eyes sweeping over my hanging herbs, my chipped bowls, my rough wool dress. When his gaze finally locks onto mine, my breath catches and something dormant inside me lifts its head for the first time in years. He removes one gauntlet slowly, exposing a scarred hand that trembles almost imperceptibly. He extends it toward me, not quite commanding, not quite pleading. His voice drops low and rough as winter wind. "I haven't touched another woman since my wife died," he says, and the raw desperation in those words steals the air from my lungs. "Come to the keep, please." The bond hums beneath my skin like distant howling, and I already know I will say yes, even though I am not ready for what it will cost me. The king did not cross my threshold like a man. He settled over the room like weather. After that first stunned heartbeat at the door, I found myself stepping backward as he entered, my fingers still caught in his. His bare hand was warm and rough against my cold, flour-dusted palm, the contrast so sharp it felt indecent. Snow melted off his armor and pattered onto my floor, soaking into the woven rushes. The cottage suddenly seemed too small for both the hearth fire and the Alpha King. Your Majesty," I stammered, "because that was what you were supposed to call a creature like him. I wasn't told you were coming." "No one was," he said. His voice filled the room, deep and scraping, like stones grinding together. "I preferred it that way." He released my hand then, and the loss of that single point of contact made my skin prickle. My wolf, usually curled somewhere quiet and unreachable, pressed toward my chest, ears forward, curious. That alone should have terrified me more than his presence, but terror had already stretched so wide inside me it felt strangely distant, like a sky I could not see the edges of. Levi moved closer to the fire, the intricate plates of his chest armor catching the light. The braids in his dark hair were damp from snow, beads and small rings threaded through them glinting like captured sparks. He did not sit. Kings, I supposed, did not need chairs. They simply occupied space, and everything around them adjusted. "You live alone," he observed, gaze traveling over the single narrow bed, the shelves of herbs, the 2 chipped bowls. "Yes," my voice came out thin. "I heal. The villagers come when they need me." His eyes returned to me as if that fact were somehow important. "You are Ivy. Omega. Healer." He tasted each word like he had carried it on his tongue for miles. "Yes," I whispered. Silence stretched between us, fat and heavy. The fire cracked, snapping a coal against the stones. I could have filled the quiet with nervous chatter about the stew, the weather, the way the snow would bury the goat shed by morning, but his presence swallowed small talk whole. Instead, I wrapped my arms around myself to hide the shaking. "I caught your scent on the border wind 3 nights ago," he said finally. The words were unexpected enough to make me stare. My scent. His jaw clenched, as if he hated talking about this, whatever this was. We were riding the northern ridge. The wind shifted. There was blood in it. Wet iron, fear, pine sap, and... His nostrils flared slightly, and for a moment his eyes flashed the faintest hint of silver. "And you." Heat flooded my face. "I wasn't at the border. I've never been beyond the valley." "I know." He spoke with the certainty of a man who had already checked. "But the storm carried you, like a thread. Faint. Wrong for that place." He paused, gaze dropping to the worn wooden floor between us. When he spoke again, the edge of command in his tone had dulled. "My wolf has not been quiet in years, little healer." He paces, bites, howls. I can force control, but there is no rest. Only pressure. His hand curled once at his side, as if he felt invisible claws inside his own skin. "When your scent reached us, for the first time since the war," he went still. My heart stuttered. Still. Good still? I asked carefully. Or the kind just before he tears something apart? The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Good. Infuriatingly good. His gaze lifted to mine again, and the rawness there made me forget, for a breath, that he wore a crown at all. He calmed. I calmed. I slept. I did not know what to say to that. A queen, a warrior, a noblewoman might have known how to answer such a confession. I was a woman who spent her days steeping willow bark and stitching cuts for farmers who paid in eggs. My tongue felt clumsy. Sometimes scents do that, I managed. Rosemary, chamomile, familiar things. I gestured vaguely at my shelves. Perhaps it was just... It was not just anything, he said, soft but immovable. I have buried a mate, Ivy. I know what bonds feel like, and I know what they are not. This is something else. He looked at me like I was a puzzle carved into bone. I wrote here because I needed to see if it was real. If you were real. I'm not much to look at, I said before I could stop myself, then winced. Your Majesty. His gaze moved slowly over my plain wool dress, the ink stain on my cuff, the strand of hair that had escaped my braid and curled against my cheek. You are, he said simply, and for a wild moment I could not breathe at all. He drew a breath as if bracing himself. I have come to ask for your help. That startled a short laugh out of me, too high and quick. What help could a king possibly need from me? His eyes flicked away, as if the admission cost him. I do not remember how to feel anything but fury and duty, he said. I can lead armies, sign decrees, bury enemies. I cannot. His throat worked. I cannot be inside my own skin without wanting to claw my way out. Except, for 3 nights now, every time I close my eyes, I smell your cottage, your herbs, the smoke on your clothes, and the pressure eases. I swallowed hard, my fingers digging into my own elbows. This was absurd, impossible, dangerous. Yet my wolf pressed harder against my ribs, drawn forward by his words like they were a low, steady howl only she could hear. What are you asking me to do? I whispered. He made a small, almost helpless gesture with one gauntleted hand. I do not know. The confession came out rough, almost angry at itself. Be near, sit by the fire, breathe. His gaze pinned me again. Help me remember how to feel something other than rage and obligation. For a few days, I will not keep you longer than that. He hesitated, then added quieter, unless you choose to stay. The room turned on that word. Stay. I should have said no. Smart Omegas did not wander into castles, did not place themselves at the mercy of kings who carried grief like a second sword. But the memory of his bare hand closing around mine at the door, the way his voice had cracked when he mentioned his wife, lodged under my ribs like a thorn. A few days, I said, almost to myself. A few days, he echoed, as if binding us both with the repetition. His shoulders loosened, just barely, and some of the winter in his eyes thawed. He glanced around my cottage again. Gather what you need. We ride when the snow softens. You mean, tonight? Do you have obligations that bind you here? His tone held no judgment, only a grave kind of courtesy that unsettled me more than command would have. I thought of old Mrs. Fenn with her chronic cough, of the stable boy who sometimes twisted his ankle, of the goats who bleated when storms rolled through. None of them needed me right now. No one ever needed me urgently enough to notice if I was gone. No, I said slowly. I can leave. He nodded once. Then pack, Ivy. I moved around the cottage on autopilot, my hands knowing the motions better than my mind did. I folded spare shifts and stockings into a worn satchel, tucked bundles of dried herbs into cloth, slid my only good knife into its sheath. Every few breaths, I felt his gaze on my back, heavy and considering, and my wolf pressed so hard against my ribs it almost hurt. You are afraid, he said quietly as I wrapped a jar of salve in wool. Yes, I answered, because there seemed little point in lying to a man who could probably smell my heartbeat. You are the Alpha King. Only a fool wouldn't be afraid. His steps sounded behind me, slow and deliberate. I went still as his reflection appeared on the copper pot hanging by the hearth, large and dark and close. And yet, you are coming. I forced myself to turn. He stood less than an arm's length away now, close enough that I could see the pale scar running along his jaw, the tired brackets carved beside his mouth. Close enough that the mix of leather, steel, pine, and something uniquely him wrapped around me like a cloak. "I told you," I said, surprised by how steady I sounded. "I'm a healer. When someone asks for help, I go." His eyes searched my face, something fierce and aching burning there. "No," he murmured. "You're doing far more dangerous than healing, little Omega." His hand lifted, stopped halfway, as if asking permission. Slowly, almost against my own instincts, I nodded. His knuckles brushed my cheek, calloused and warm, barely there. The touch sent a shiver down to my toes. "You are walking into the mouth of the wolf," he said, "and I do not know if I can promise not to bite." My breath left me in a shaky rush. "Then I will have to trust," I whispered. "That the wolf wants to be healed more than he wants to devour." The sound he made at that half-laugh, half-broken exhale lodged itself in my memory like a brand. He dropped his hand, stepping back as if tearing himself away. "Finish packing," he said, the king sliding back over the man. "I will see to the horses." When the door closed behind him, the cottage seemed suddenly, impossibly empty. I stood in the middle of it, satchel hanging limp from my fingers, listening to the distant clink of metal and the muffled voices of his men outside. My world had always been small. 4 stone walls, 1 crooked bed, a shelf of herbs, a path to the village. Now a king had walked into it, asked for my help in stitching together a soul torn by war, and invited me into his keep. My wolf pressed against my ribs again, not with fear this time, but with something bright and restless. Eager. The fortress rose out of the snow like a fist. By the time we reached the hill, my fingers were numb inside my gloves, and my thighs ached from riding a horse far larger than any village pony. Stone walls loomed above us, jagged and dark against the pale sky, banners hanging limp in the winter air. Torches burned along the ramparts, their smoke curling into the wind like warning signs. I had seen the keep from the valley my whole life, a distant silhouette against the clouds. Up close, it felt less like a building and more like a living creature that had sunk its claws into the mountain and refused to let go. The gates groaned open as our small party approached. Guards in black and silver stepped aside at Levi's nod. But their eyes lingered on me, on my plain cloak, my village boots, the satchel clutched in my hands. Some stared openly, some pretended not to, but I felt every glance like a prick along my skin. Inside the courtyard, nobles and high-ranked wolves moved among the stables and steps, their furs rich, their laughter sharp. It died the instant they noticed who rode in. A hush fell, the kind that gathers before a storm breaks. "Your Majesty," someone called, bowing low. The title rippled through the crowd like a wave. No one said my name. Levi swung down from his horse with easy grace. When he turned and offered his hand to help me dismount, a few whispers turned to audible gasps. I could almost hear the questions forming behind their teeth. Who is she? Why is he touching her? What is an Omega healer doing at the king's side? My cheeks burned. I thought of refusing his hand, of leaping down on my own to prove I did not need him, but the ground looked very far away, and my legs felt like water. So I placed my fingers in his, and let him steady me as I slid to the cobblestones. His palm was bare again, warm despite the chill. Our eyes met, just for a heartbeat, and something in his gaze softened, as if he too remembered the small cottage, and what it had cost him to step over that threshold. "Come," he said quietly, releasing me. "You must be warm." He led me through archways and up wide steps, guards falling into formation like a shadowed river behind us. The nobles parted at his approach, bowing, lowering their eyes, but not before I caught flashes of curiosity, disdain, hunger. My wolf shrank back from their attention, pressing herself tight against my ribs. Inside, the keep was dim and echoing. Stone swallowed sound, turning every footstep into a hollow drumbeat. Tapestries hung on the walls, scenes of battles and coronations, wolves and men, blood and glory woven in red and gold. I recognized Levi's profile in more than one, younger, less haunted, his shoulders squared beneath a different weight. He noticed me looking. "You can ignore those," he said. "They are for courtiers and visiting alphas. I rarely see them." "Still," I murmured, my gaze tracing a stitched sword. "They must have taken a long time." "Things that glorify war always do," he answered, voice flat. We climbed another set of stairs and turned down a narrower corridor. Here, the air felt different, quieter, the torchlight softer, the scent of smoke and stone giving way to something more intimate. Leather, ink, the faintest trace of pine. He stopped before a heavy wooden door banded in iron. "This will be yours." He pushed it open and stood aside so I could enter first. The chamber was not what I expected. I had imagined gilded bedposts and velvet curtains, the kind of luxury nobles draped themselves in like armor. Instead, the room was simple but generous. A large bed with thick furs, a sturdy chest at its foot, a small writing table by the window. A hearth waited, laid but unlit. Another door in the far wall stood closed. "It is beautiful," I said, because it was in a clean, quiet way. "It is near my own rooms," Levi replied. "For my convenience, as your patient." He said it with such careful neutrality that it might almost have sounded casual, if not for the faint tightness around his mouth. "For your convenience," I echoed, hiding my hands in my sleeves so he would not see my fingers twist. Being near the king was not convenient for me at all. He stepped inside and lit the hearth with practiced movements, coaxing flame from flint and tinder. The fire caught quickly, spilling warmth into the chamber. It painted his armor in flickering orange, caught in the metal rings woven through his braids. "Someone will bring you water and food," he said without turning. "If you need anything, you may tell the guards outside." "What if I need you?" The question slipped out before I could choke it back down. He froze, just for a breath, shoulders rigid. Then he straightened, still facing the fire. "My time is not always my own," he said slowly. "But if the need is real, they will find me." It wasn't the answer of a man who didn't care. It was the answer of a king who had to measure every minute against a kingdom's demands. "Rest," he added. "You have ridden far." He left before I could say anything else, the door closing with a soft thud that sounded far too final. Alone, I moved through the room like a ghost, touching the carved bedposts, the cool stone of the windowsill, the iron latch on the inner door. When I opened it, I found another chamber beyond larger, dominated by a heavy desk buried under parchment and maps, shelves of books lining the walls. I retreated quickly, heart thudding. His room, my room, a door between. Too near, indeed. Our days slid into a strange rhythm sooner than I expected. In the mornings, a maid with quick hands and big eyes, Mara brought me bread, cheese, and hot tea. She did not ask questions, though her gaze lingered on my omega collar once or twice, as if wondering how someone like me had landed in chambers like these. By mid-morning, a guard would appear at my door and say, "His Majesty requests his healer." I would follow through the now familiar corridor to Levi's study, where he often waited by the window, hands braced on the stone sill, looking out over the snow-covered valley. Sometimes he wore armor, sometimes a simple linen shirt and dark trousers, but always he carried the same heaviness in the set of his shoulders. We began with his hands. He removed his gloves and laid them on the table, then held his palms out to me without a word. Old wounds crossed them thin white lines from blade practice, raised ridges from burns, a jagged scar along the base of his thumb where something had torn instead of sliced. Some were badly healed, as if whoever had tended them had cared more about speed than comfort. "May I?" I asked the first time, hovering. "You are here to touch me," he said, and then winced, as if realizing how that sounded. "To heal," he corrected. "Yes." So I took his hands in mine, turned them gently, traced the scars with careful fingers while he watched my face instead of the damage. I worked salve into the old burns, massaged the stiff tendons until warmth returned to them, smoothing away some of the tightness. "You should have done this long ago," I murmured one afternoon, thumb circling a knot at the base of his palm. "There was a war," he said. "Then a kingdom to rebuild. And no one thought to ask if the king's hands hurt?" His mouth quirked. The king did not think to ask himself. In the afternoons, when court was less demanding, he sometimes walked with me through the keep. He showed me a long gallery of tapestries, pointing out which battles were exaggerated. That dragon was hardly bigger than a horse, and which were softened. The snow should be redder here. We passed through an echoing hall with empty hooks along the walls. "What hung there?" I asked. "Banners," he said, "from allied packs. Some were burned in the war to keep them from enemy hands. The rest," he paused. "They will return when their alphas are ready to trust this place again." The emptiness felt loud, somehow. More than once, He led me to a quiet courtyard where a fountain had frozen mid-cascade. Water captured in ice like glass claws reaching for the sky. We did not speak much there. Sometimes he simply stood, breathing slowly, as if counting each exhale. I would sit on the low stone wall and let the silence stretch, my presence a small, steady weight near his. Only in those moments did his wolf feel calm, not asleep, but watchful, no longer clawing at him from the inside. It was during one such walk that he led me up a narrow stair to a smaller chamber, a private solar, he called it, with a low table, a bank of windows, and shelves crowded with more books than I had ever seen in one place. A simple meal waited, bread still warm, slices of salted meat, a pot of vegetable stew steaming gently. "We will eat here," he said, away from eyes and ears. My stomach fluttered. "Together?" His brows drew together. "You must eat, Ivy, and so must I," he added, almost grudgingly. "It seems easier when you are near." We sat opposite each other at the low table, knees almost touching under the wood. My hands felt clumsy as I reached for a piece of bread. At the same moment, he did the same. Our fingers brushed. It was the lightest contact, skin skimming skin, but the jolt that shot up my arm felt like grabbing a live wire. Heat flared at the base of my spine. My wolf surged, pressing so hard against my ribs I had to bite back a gasp. Levi's hand went still on the loaf. His eyes snapped up to mine, silver flickering through the gray like lightning behind storm clouds. "Did you?" His voice came out rougher than before. He cleared his throat. "Did you feel that?" "Yes," I breathed. The space between us vibrated with something unnamed. Neither of us moved, bread forgotten. For a heartbeat, 2, 10, I thought knew that he would lean across the table and drag me into his lap, that I would let him, that we would both shatter the careful distance we'd been keeping. Instead, he drew his hand back with slow deliberation, as if pulling it out of fire. "We should eat," he said, the words flat and too controlled. "You need strength for your work." My cheeks burned. Of course. We managed the rest of the meal in fragile normality, talking about nothing, the snowfall, the quality of the year's harvest, which herbs grew best in rocky soil. But every time our hands drifted too close, we both froze, then retreated like cowards, afraid of our own fingers. That night, back in my chamber, I lay awake long after the fire burned down to embers. The keep was quieter at that hour. The muffled sounds of servants and guards faded to distant hum. I should have slept. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and replayed that brief, electric touch over and over. Sometime past midnight, I heard it, soft, measured footsteps pacing the corridor outside my door, back and forth, heavy enough that I knew without seeing who it was. My wolf lifted her head, ears pricked. I held my breath, waiting for a knock, for the latch to turn, for anything. None came. The footsteps continued for a long time, a restless rhythm just beyond the wood between us, like a heartbeat I could not quite sync with. Eventually, they faded, moving away down the corridor. Only then did I sleep, my palms still tingling, as if the warmth of his touch had settled there to stay. The invitation came at mid-morning, carried not by a guard but by Levi himself. I was grinding dried bark at my small table when a shadow fell over the doorway of my chamber. My wolf stirred before I even looked up. Then his scent reached me, pine, steel, smoke, and the pestle went still in my hand. "Ivy." His voice, low and rough, filled the room. I turned. He stood there still in black armor, braids tied back from his face, dust along his jaw as if he had come straight from some battle I hadn't seen. "Your Majesty," I murmured, dipping my head. Something flickered in his eyes at the title, but he didn't correct me. "Come with me." "Is someone hurt?" I reached automatically for my satchel. "Not badly." His gaze swept over the mess of herbs and bowls. "I want you to see something." Want, not need. The word lodged under my ribs. "Yes," I said, wiping my hands. "Of course." He waited as I pulled on my boots and cloak, then walked beside me through the corridors. We moved in silence, the hush of the keep broken only by the distant clang of metal and the sharp calls of someone drilling soldiers. "You spend your days inside stone," I blurted. "Does it ever feel like it's closing in?" "Often," he said. "That is why we are going outside." The winter air slapped my cheeks as we stepped into the training yard. Packed snow formed a rough circle. Wooden dummies slumped along the wall. Weapons glinted on racks. Warriors were already sparring, blades clashing, breath steaming. "Clear the yard," Levi called. Swords stilled. In the space of a heartbeat, wolves dropped to one knee, heads bowed. At his nod, they rose and filed out, curious glances snagging on me as they passed. When the gates shut, only we remained. "You sent them away," I said quietly. "Should I wait somewhere else while you train?" "I did not bring you here to watch me fight," he replied. "I brought you to see me without steel between us." My heart tripped. "We are in a yard full of steel." "Not between us," he repeated, and began stripping off his armor. He unbuckled the engraved chest piece, set it aside, then removed the padded leather, the vambraces, each piece revealing more of the man I had only glimpsed in half-light. Underneath he wore a plain linen shirt and dark trousers, the fabric damp and clinging to the lines of his shoulders and chest. Steam rose faintly from his skin in the cold. Scars marked his forearms, pale slashes, puckered burns, one jagged line near his elbow. My healer's eye catalogued them without permission. "You're injured," I said, nodding at the fresh cut along his left forearm, bandaged with a rough strip of cloth, the edges already dark with blood. "Careless blade," he said. "It happens. You have healers for that." I sent them away. His gaze held mine. "I wanted it to be you." My fingers tightened around my satchel. "Then sit," I said, because doing something with my hands felt safer than standing there under the weight of those words. He didn't sit, Kings apparently didn't need to, but he did extend his arm. I stepped closer, the cold air shrinking as his warmth reached me. "May I?" I asked, hovering just above his skin. "You are here to touch me," he said, then grimaced. "To heal, I mean." "Yes." I bit back a smile and carefully unwound the makeshift bandage. The cloth stuck. He hissed when air hit the wound. "Sorry." "Do not apologize for pain I earned," he murmured. The cut was deeper than I'd hoped, but clean. I rinsed it with chilled water, my fingers brushing his skin. Heat seeped into my fingertips. The contrast to the air made me shiver. "You're tense," I said softly. "Holding everything too tight will keep it from closing." "Tense," he echoed, a rough breath of humor. "I stand unarmed in front of an Omega who smells like quiet after battle. Forgive me if I find it hard to relax." My hands faltered. "Levi." The name slipped out bare. His eyes flashed silver at the sound. "There," he said, again. "Levi," I whispered. Something in his face eased, as if the syllables soothed a muscle no one else had ever touched. He stepped closer, just enough that the space between us turned fragile. "I have not allowed anyone this near," he said quietly, "physically or otherwise, since the war." His gaze dropped to my hands, moving over his skin. "Not like this. No armor, no audience, no purpose beyond needing it." "Needing it," I repeated. "Or needing me." His jaw clenched. "Yes." My breath went thin. I dipped my fingers into salve and worked it gently along the edges of the cut, letting the familiar motions steady me. His pulse beat steady beneath my touch, strong and strangely vulnerable. "Everyone needs someone," I said, mostly to the wound. "Even kings. Especially kings," he answered. I reached for a fresh strip of cloth. My hands shook just enough to make the knot difficult. I fumbled it, once, twice. "Here," he murmured. His larger hand closed over mine, guiding my fingers. His palm swallowed my own, calloused but careful. Together, we drew the cloth snug and tied it. Heat flared at the point of contact, racing up my arm. The world narrowed to our joined hands. I could hear distant training in some other yard, the caw of a crow, the soft crunch of snow beneath our boots, but underneath everything, the rushing of my own heartbeat. His breath brushed my temple. If I leaned up just a little, my mouth would be at his throat. "You're shaking," he said. "It's cold." "You are flushed," he countered. "Then perhaps the cold and I have a complicated relationship." A sound escaped him, half laugh, half groan. His free hand lifted, stopping just shy of my waist, before he curled it into a fist at his side, as though holding himself back took as much strength as any battle. "Ivy," he said. My name a warning and a plea. Yes, I breathed. His gaze dropped to my mouth. Slowly, as if pushing against invisible chains, he bent his head. I felt the warmth of him before his skin touched mine, the promise in the air between us, the way our wolves surged to the surface in perfect, wordless agreement. The space left was a breath, no more. "Your Majesty!" a voice shouted from the stairs. Levi went still. For a heartbeat, his forehead hovered a whisper from mine. Then he stepped back, our hands falling apart. Cold, rushed in where his warmth had been. "Enter," he called, his tone snapping back into command so sharply it almost hurt. A young messenger stumbled into the yard, cheeks flushed from the run, eyes wide as he took in Levi's state of undress and our proximity. He dropped to one knee. "Forgive me," he panted. "The council begs your presence. There's trouble at the eastern border." Of course there was. "I will attend," Levi said, jaw tight. "Wait outside." The boy scrambled away. For a moment, it was just us again, the almost kiss hanging between us like a held breath. "Thank you," Levi said quietly, looking at the bandage instead of my face. "For this, it's only a cut," I replied, though we both knew that wasn't what he meant. His gaze flicked up, pinning me. "It is not only anything." His voice softened. "We will speak later, if there is a later," my wolf whispered. He gathered his armor in quick, efficient motions and left the yard without looking back. Duty swallowed him whole, as it always did. I stood alone in the cold circle of trampled snow, my palms still tingling from his touch, my lips buzzing with the kiss that had almost been. The wind cut through my cloak, but inside my chest, something burned hot and restless. We had seen each other without armor, and the most terrifying part was how much more I wanted. The storm arrived by morning, and did not stop. Snow blurred the world beyond the narrow window, hammering the shutters so hard the iron latch rattled. The usual sounds of the keep bootsteps, shouted orders, the clang of steel muffled under the weight of it. The corridors felt hollowed out, the air colder, as if the whole fortress were holding its breath. By dusk, Mara had piled extra furs on my bed and muttered about being snowed in for days. When she left, my chamber seemed too quiet, the fire's crackle suddenly loud. I cupped my hands around a mug of tea, letting the heat soak into my fingers. My wolf lay strangely calm inside me, ears pricked not at the storm, but at something else, something she was waiting for. The knock came when the sky outside had turned the color of bruised stone. 3 steady knocks, not urgent, not tentative, familiar. "Come in," I called, hoping my voice did not betray how my heart jumped. The door opened and Levi stepped through, closing it firmly behind him. Snow dusted his dark hair and the shoulders of his black tunic, melting in tiny rivulets down the fabric. He wore no armor tonight, only simple clothes and a cloak he shrugged off, hanging it on the peg by the door, as if he had always done so. "Your Majesty," I said, rising automatically. His gaze swept the room, the bed layered in furs, the small table, the fire burning low before settling on me. "The storm has worsened," he said. "I came to ensure my healer's comfort." The words were formal enough to repeat in a council chamber, but the way he lingered in the doorway said something else entirely. "I'm warm," I answered. "You didn't have to come yourself." "Yes," he replied, moving toward the hearth. "I did." He crouched to add a log to the fire. Sparks leapt, light spilling over the planes of his face. Up close, he looked tired in a way armor usually hid faint shadows under his eyes, a tightness around his mouth that did not loosen even in the soft glow. "You could have sent a servant," I said, sinking back to the edge of the bed. "Or summoned me to your solar if you wanted company." "My solar is full of maps and ghosts," he said. "Yours smells like tea and pine resin. I prefer ghosts with better manners." A startled laugh escaped me. "I can't promise mine are polite. I have seen what you keep on those shelves." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "If your ghosts misbehave, you likely have an herb for that too." He took the only chair by the fire without asking, but somehow it felt less like a king claiming a seat and more like a man taking refuge. His long legs stretched toward the hearth. The heat painted his skin in gold. For a while, we listened to the storm claw at the walls. "Does it bother you?" I asked quietly. "The noise." "Yes." He did not pretend otherwise. "It sounds too much like that night." The night that broke your court, I said, watching his profile. His jaw tightened. You've heard the stories. Only fragments. I wrapped my hands tighter around the mug. Stories prefer drama to truth. In this case, he said, gaze fixed on the flames, they are kinder than the truth. You don't have to tell me, I offered. Not if it hurts. It hurts whether I speak it or not. He inhaled slowly. Tonight, I find I would rather not be the only one who hears it. So I stayed quiet and let the fire fill the spaces between us. It was 3 winters ago, he began. We hosted a gathering to seal peace with the Eastern Pax. The keep was full nobles, warriors, children chasing each other through the halls. We thought the danger was outside our walls. We were wrong. His hands tightened on his knees. Firelight caught faint tremors in his fingers. They struck from within, he said. Wolves who'd taken coin or threats from our enemies. They opened the gates. By the time the alarm sounded, the courtyard was already red. He swallowed. I fought from staircase to hall to chapel, trying to be everywhere at once. I was not. He stared into the fire as if seeing something else entirely. There was a girl, he continued. 11, maybe. She had my banner stitched to her cloak. When the chaos broke, she reached for me. His voice roughened. I saw her hand. I did not reach fast enough. My heart clenched. Levi. They cut her down before I could cross the distance, he said. I killed every wolf between us, but she was already gone. After that, every hand that reached for me looked like hers. Every plea sounded like hers. I learned that the more I cared, the more blood soaked the stones. He laughed once, harsh and quiet. So I stopped allowing myself to care. How long? I asked, barely above a whisper. Since that night, he said. Since before, if I am honest. My mate died in another battle, another failure. After she was gone, closing off felt easier than drowning in what I could not fix. Duty was simpler than grief. The storm beat harder at the glass, as if insisting on the memory. Do you still see them? I asked. Every time I close my eyes, he said. The child in the cloak. My mate. The ones whose names I never learned. I wake with my hands curled, expecting blood. Instead, there is only stone, a throne, an empty bed. He exhaled, long and slow, until recently. Recently, I repeated. His gaze flicked to me, then away. Lately, when I wake, I smell smoke and tea and chamomile. I hear an omega scolding me about scar tissue. It does not erase the nightmares, but it reminds me I am here, not there. My throat went tight. You shouldn't have had to carry all of that alone. Who else should? He asked. I am the king. You're a man wearing a crown, I corrected gently. The crown can carry the blame. The man is allowed to hurt. For a moment, he looked at me as if I had struck him. Then something in his eyes thawed. You said you survived by being invisible, he said, shifting the weight of the conversation. By staying quiet. I took a breath. I wasn't born in the hill pack. My parents were traitors. When I was 8, a border skirmish turned into something uglier. Our camp burned. Packs argued over who was at fault. I was a convenient asset. His gaze sharpened. They traded you. Healers are useful, I said lightly, though my fingers tightened on the mug. An omega healer even more so. I went where I was told. North, south, east. Whoever had me lost fewer wolves to infection. That made me valuable enough to keep breathing, not valuable enough to ask what I wanted. Rage flickered through his expression, banked but fierce. How many packs? Enough. I forced a small smile. The hill pack is gentler than the rest. They kept me. But I had learned the lesson by then. Stay quiet, stay helpful, stay forgettable. If no one looks too closely, they cannot take more from you. Silence settled again, softer this time. They should have protected you, he said. They didn't, I answered. But I'm here now. I have a room, a hearth, and a king who insists on checking if I'm warm during storms. That tugged a real, if fleeting, smile from him. It made him look younger, less carved from stone. His gaze dropped to his own hands. I do not remember, he said slowly, the last time anyone touched me without flinching, without fear, or calculation, or desire for advantage. His voice lowered. I do not remember the last time it was just a hand on mine, nothing more. Something in my chest ached. Words felt too small. So I set my mug aside and crossed the short space between us. He watched me approach, very still, as if any sudden movement might send me fleeing. My heart hammered, but my wolf remained calm, urging me forward. Without asking permission, I reached for his hand. His fingers tensed, then stilled as I wrapped both of mine around his. His palm was large and scarred, the skin calloused and warm. No salve this time. No blood, no excuse of injury. Just contact. For a breath, nothing changed. Then his shoulders dropped by a fraction, as if some tightly coiled muscle finally released. His eyes slid closed, lashes casting shadows on his cheeks. He inhaled, shaky and slow. Like this, he whispered. Gods, just like this. I tightened my grip slightly, my thumbs resting along the ridge of his knuckles. I'm not flinching, I murmured. I noticed, he said, a rough thread of humor in the words. I'm not asking you for anything, I added. Not favors, not titles, not promises. I know. I'm just here. I finished softly. If the storm is too loud, if the ghosts are too many, if you wake with blood in your head and need to remember there's only a fire and bad tea, I'm here. His other hand lifted slowly, as if moving through water, and settled on top of mine, enclosing them completely. It didn't feel like a cage. It felt like shelter. You have no idea, he said, voice barely more than breath, what that means to me. I don't think you realize, I replied, what it means that you're letting me. For a while, we said nothing else. The storm raged outside, furious and relentless. Inside my small chamber, the king of the realm sat by my hearth with his eyes closed, and Omega's hands wrapped around his, breathing as if each inhale hurt a little less. My wolf curled closer, content. That night, for the first time in years, neither of us faced the darkness entirely alone. The summons came with the first gray light of morning, delivered by a guard who looked everywhere but at me. His Majesty is called to council, he said. You are requested as well, healer. Requested. As if I could say no. My wolf shifted uneasily while I dressed, claws tracing slow circles under my ribs. When Levi arrived at my door, he wore full armor, dark and polished, his braids threaded with iron. The king. Not the man who'd fallen asleep once with his hand still wrapped around mine by the hearth. He didn't offer his arm, but he walked close enough that our shoulders nearly brushed as we moved through the corridors. The great hall waited ahead. Torches already burning, voices buzzing like flies. They fell silent as we entered. The council sat on the raised dais beneath the carved wolves, old alphas with shrewd eyes, nobles wrapped in furs, a few younger wolves whose ambition hung on them like too bright jewelry. Their gazes skimmed over Levi with perfunctory respect, then snagged on me. I felt the assessment like dirty fingers on my skin. Your Majesty, said Lord Harrow, rising. His hair was more silver than black, his smile sharp. Thank you for coming so promptly. I answer when my council calls, Levi said. His voice rang against stone. Why is my healer involved in this discussion? Harrow's glance toward me held polite disdain. Because, sire, she is at the heart of our concern. Levi went very still. Watch your next words. Lady Karen, seated to Harrow's left, folded her hands, rings flashing. The realm grows restless, she said smoothly. The eastern pacts test our borders. Trade falters in the south. Whispers spread that grief has left you distracted. Her eyes cut to me, then away as if I were barely worth seeing. You spend your evenings, Harrow continued, in private chambers with an Omega of no rank while duty waits at your door. Allies are beginning to question your priorities. My cheeks burned hot, then cold. The old instinct to step back, to make myself smaller, clawed at me. Levi's growl rolled through the hall, low and deadly. You will not insult her. Harrow bowed his head a fraction, but his mouth didn't soften. We speak only out of concern, sire. The solution is simple. A firm alliance, a marriage to solidify our strength. A political binding, Karen added. Alpha Lady Maris of Ironwood has offered herself. She brings warriors, lands, and coin. A union with her would secure the Eastern Front and silence those who say the king cares more for his Omega distraction than his kingdom. The words landed like a slap. Omega distraction. My wolf surged to her feet, hackles up. Years of practiced invisibility tore along their seams. The urge to bare my throat warred with the desperate need to bare my teeth instead. Levi's hand twitched at his side. Do not call her that again. Then prove she is not, Harrow replied. Take a queen whose worth no one can question, a strong alpha, bred to rule. Your companion need not interfere with the duties of your crown. Their implication was clear. Let the Omega keep his bed warm. Let the queen keep his throne steady. Something inside me snapped. My lord, I said. The word came out too loud in the sudden hush. Dozens of eyes swung toward me. My knees wanted to buckle, but my wolf shoved up beneath them, lending me a spine. You speak of me as if I'm not in the room. I continued, voice trembling but not breaking. As if I am a spell gone wrong. I mend wounds that your wars create. I sit with your king when the ghosts you gave him won't let him sleep. If I am a distraction, I am one you all helped make. Gasps fluttered along the benches. Corinne's lips thinned. You forget your place, girl, she said coldly. I know my place, I answered, surprising myself. It's at a bedside, at a battlefield, beside a hearth where your king remembers he's more than a blade. I have never asked him for a crown. I have never asked you for anything. But I will not stand silent while you speak of me like I'm some sickness he needs to be cured of. Levi's attention burned over my skin. Pride, fear, something fierce and aching all tangled together. You presume to lecture this council, Harrow demanded. I presume, I said, my wolf finally baring her teeth in my eyes, that a king who cannot choose his own life will not be strong enough to defend yours for long. Tying him to a stranger for coin and soldiers won't fix the rot you're afraid to name. Corinne half rose from her seat. She is insolent. She is brave, Levi said, his voice cutting clean through the noise. More than many who've sat at this table for years. The hall fell into charged silence. Harrow regrouped first. Courage is admirable, but it does not secure borders, he said. We ask only that you consider what is best for the realm, sire. A match with Ironwood would calm unrest, deter enemies, and prove that grief has not made you weak. I am not weak, Levi hissed. Then show them, Corinne pressed. Announce the betrothal. You need not love her. You need only stand beside her. Levi's jaw clenched. I watched him weigh his answer. Saw the war behind his eyes, the kingdom on one side, whatever fragile thing existed between us on the other. When he spoke, it felt like the whole hall held its breath. I will consider, he said at last. The words cut sharper than any blade. Not yes, not no. A battlefield drawn between us. Harrow inclined his head, satisfied. We await your decision. We were dismissed. Levi did not take my arm as we left. He walked fast, his silence a cloak I couldn't pierce. At my chamber door, he stopped but did not look at me. Rest, he said. You spoke boldly today. It sounded almost like a rebuke, almost like reverence. Did I make things worse? I asked, hating the thin thread of hope in my voice. His eyes met mine then, raw. You told the truth, he said. That rarely makes things easier. He lifted a hand as if to touch my cheek, then let it fall. I have matters to attend. And then he was gone. The hours crawled. I tried to grind herbs, to read, to sleep. My hands were clumsy. My eyes slid over ink without taking it in. The council's words replayed in an endless loop. Omega distraction. An alpha queen at his side, a crown between them, and me shoved back into the shadows where everyone thought I belonged. By the time night settled, snow whispered against the shutters. I had almost convinced myself he would not come when a soft knock sounded. Ivy, he said through the wood, voice rough. Please. I opened the door. Levi stood there with his hair unbound, shadows clinging to his face. Without armor, he seemed both larger and more breakable at once. May I come in? He asked, as if he hadn't already taken up every corner of my mind. Yes, I whispered. He stepped inside, closing the door quietly. For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then, he crossed the room in 3 strides and stopped, so close, the heat of him brushed my skin. I should have refused them, he rasped. I should have thrown their offer back in their faces. You're king, I said. You can't ignore the realm for you? He finished harshly. I have ignored myself for years. I am tired of pretending that costs nothing. His hands rose, hovering at my arms as if afraid I'd vanish if he touched me. They will push, he said. They will paint me into a corner with their fear and their logic and their numbers, and I don't know if I can fight them all and keep the kingdom from cracking. Pain lanced through me. You're saying you might accept. I'm saying I don't know yet, he admitted, voice breaking at the edges. And that not knowing is tearing me apart. He leaned his forehead down until it rested against mine. The contact stole my breath, stilled my wolf. Ivy, he whispered, his fingers finally settling at my hips, light but desperate. If they force this marriage, if duty chains me to a woman I do not want, promise me you won't leave. I closed my eyes. His words sank deep, roots and thorns both. You want me here, I said slowly, while you stand beside someone else. I want you here because without you, I will disappear into the thing they already think I am, he said. A blade, a crown, nothing more. You keep me. His voice dropped to a ragged whisper. I am begging you. Don't go. My heart hurt so much it was hard to speak. I don't know if I'm strong enough to watch you belong to someone else. His grip tightened, as if my doubt physically hurt him. I do not belong to anyone, he said fiercely. Not yet, and if I have any say, it will be you and no other. He drew a rough breath. But if I fail, if I cannot win this battle, at least let me lose with your hand still in mine. His forehead pressed harder against mine, our breaths mingling, our wolves circling close and restless inside our skins. I can't promise forever, I whispered, but I can promise right now. Tonight, I'm not leaving. Relief shuddered through him. His hands slid up my sides, fingers digging in just enough to anchor us both. Right now, he echoed, I will fight like hell to turn that into always. We stood there, clinging to each other in a small room, inside a stone fortress, while the storm raged outside and the council plotted futures with my king's name on them. For that moment, at least, he was not theirs. He was just Levi, breathing hard against my mouth, holding on to his Omega as if she were the only thing keeping him from falling apart. For 3 days, the king swallowed the man. Levi was everywhere and nowhere heard in the echo of orders, glimpsed at the far end of corridors, his scent lingering in rooms he had already left. Messages replaced visits. Trays replaced shared meals. Guards replaced his knock. His Majesty is in council. His Majesty is reviewing patrols. His Majesty is not to be disturbed. The keep shifted with him. Servants moved more quietly. Laughter died quicker. The air grew thinner, as if the stone itself remembered the cold, unreachable war king and was ready to welcome him back. My wolf paced restlessly inside me. Every time I caught sight of him, armor on, expression carved from ice, she pressed against my ribs, whining. That's ours, she seemed to say. Why is he pretending we're not? On the 4th day, Mara mentioned, as she straightened my blankets, that Levi had been locked in the war room since dawn and had sent away 2 meals untouched. He looks worse than the storm did, she muttered, like something's eating him from the inside. Something was... Before fear could talk me out of it, I left my tea cooling by the hearth and marched through the keep. My boots rang on stone, my heart beating time with each step. The closer I got to the war room, the thinner the air felt. 2 guards flanked the door. The king is not to be, one began. Disturbed. Yes, I've heard. I stopped in front of them, lifting my chin. I'm his healer. If he's sending back food and hasn't left this room all day, he is not well. Stand aside. They exchanged a look. One of them shifted. Just a fraction. 5 minutes, he said gruffly. If he kills us for letting you in, I'm blaming you. Fair, I said, and pushed the door open before my courage could evaporate. The war room was a map made solid walls hung with charts, a massive table drowning in parchment, lines and markers scattered like casualties. A single fire struggled in the hearth, pushing shadows rather than warmth. Levi stood at the far end of the table, hands braced on either side of a spread map, head bowed. No armor, just a dark shirt, sleeves rolled, forearms tense. His hair was pulled back in a rough tie, a few strands falling loose around his face. I said I wasn't to be disturbed, he snapped without looking up. Good thing I've never been very obedient, I said, closing the door behind me. He stiffened. Slowly, he raised his head. The eyes that met mine were colder than I'd seen in weeks, no hearth light, no softness, just winter. It hurt. Ivy, he said, My name flattened into something distant. This room is for matters of state, not your Omega distraction? I cut in, anger flaring hot enough to chase back the chill. Because from here, it looks like you're using matters of state to avoid everything else. His jaw clenched. I am ruling. You're hiding, I shot back, walking toward him. From me, from the choice you promised you'd make. I promised I would fight, he snapped. I didn't promise it would be easy. You also promised you'd try to choose me, I said, voice shaking. But for days, the only thing you've chosen is this room. Silence cracked between us. He straightened slowly, hands leaving the table. Without the maps anchoring him, he looked suddenly tired. Shadows carved under his eyes. You are not the only one who is afraid, he said quietly. I know that, I answered. What I don't know is if you're more afraid of losing your kingdom or of needing me. His laugh was short, humorless. Needing you is not the problem. Then what is? I demanded. His gaze burned. The problem is what happens if I let myself need you and then have to choose the kingdom over you anyway. The words hit like a stone. So instead of risking that pain, I said, you're trying to cut me out now, before anyone forces your hand. If I give them my yes, he ground out. If I bind myself to some alpha queen for alliances, you will be the one who bleeds. I will bleed either way, I said, throat tight. The difference is whether I get to know you tried. He turned away, raking a hand through his hair. You think I'm not trying? I spend every hour in this room searching for some path that keeps the borders from burning without sacrificing you on an altar of strategy. Then why do I feel like you've already started letting me go? I whispered. He flinched, shoulders tensing. Because I'm trying to protect you. By pretending I don't matter? My voice rose. By turning back into the king everyone fears, so I'll decide to leave on my own? He spun back toward me. Would you rather I drag you into every bloody calculation? He snarled. You are not a pawn, Ivy. Then stop moving me like one, I shot back. I deserve to know what game I'm standing in. We stared at each other, breathing hard. I am terrified, I admitted, the word ripping its way out, of waking up one morning and hearing the bells ring for your betrothal while I'm still in this room, still smelling you on my pillows. Of becoming a story you tell yourself to fall asleep. His face crumpled at the edges. I am terrified, he said, that loving you will make every decision after this unbearable, that every casualty will have your face because I chose you once and didn't choose them. I'm not asking you to stop caring about them, I said. I'm asking you not to stop caring about me to make it easier. You don't understand. Then make me, I cut in. Stop shutting me out and calling it protection. Let me stand beside you while you decide, or let me walk away. But don't keep me in this half-life where I'm close enough to taste you and far enough that you think I won't hurt when you cut me out. Silence. The fire popped. Somewhere outside, a bell tolled faintly. Levi's breath came faster now, matching mine. You think I could survive you walking away? You would, I said. You're stubborn. You'd turn yourself to stone and call it survival. His mouth twisted. You make it sound so noble, little Omega. It isn't, I replied. It's lonely. Something inside him cracked. He stepped around the table, closing the distance between us in 4 long strides. I expected him to stop in front of me, to loom, to argue. Instead, he dropped to his knees. The sight knocked the air from my lungs. The Alpha King knelt on the war room floor, in the middle of his maps and strategies, his hands settling on my waist as if he needed to hold on to something that wouldn't crumble. Ivy, he rasped, head bowed. Look at what you've reduced me to. My hands flew to his shoulders on instinct, fingers digging into hard muscle. You did this yourself, I whispered. I only walked through the door. He tipped his head back, eyes bright and wild. I cannot do this without you. The words came out like a confession dragged from him. I have tried. For days I have tried to imagine a future with some carefully chosen queen and no you, and all I see is a frozen throne and a man I already hate. My throat burned. Levi, if there is any path that keeps this kingdom standing and keeps you by my side, I will find it, he said, voice shaking. I will fight them in council. I will pull apart treaties. I will bleed every ounce of loyalty this place still has for me. Just... His fingers tightened on my waist. Don't leave before I get the chance to choose you. He looked up at me like a prayer. "Believe in me," he said, for a little longer. The war maps blurred behind him as tears stung my eyes. Gently, I moved my hands from his shoulders to his face, cupping his jaw. Rough stubble scraped my palms. His eyes fluttered closed at the touch. "You kneel in rooms built for men to kneel to you," I said softly. "You think I don't see what that means? Tell me it's not pathetic," he muttered, half broken, half wry. "It's honest," I answered. "And I told you I'd rather hurt with the truth than be safe in a lie." His eyes opened again, silver flickering through storm gray. "I am so afraid of losing you." "I am too," I breathed. "But I'm more afraid of never knowing what we could have been because we were both cowards." He made a sound like a laugh strangled by a sob. "Get up," I whispered. "Please." He rose slowly, hands sliding up my sides as he stood until we were chest to chest, breath mingling. One of his hands moved to the back of my neck, fingers threading into my hair, holding me like I was something fragile and fiercely wanted. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, hovering a heartbeat away. "And I will." "I won't," I said. His mouth found mine. The kiss started careful, as if he was afraid I'd vanish if he pressed too hard. It didn't stay that way. Heat flared, slow and deep, curling through my belly as his lips moved against mine with aching reverence. My hands slid into his hair, tugging him closer. He groaned, the sound vibrating through me. Our wolves surged, crashing together like waves. Mine leapt toward his, joy sharp enough to hurt. His answered with a howl that echoed through my bones. The world narrowed to shared breath, shared heat, the taste of a man who had forgotten how to want and was relearning all at once. Something bright tugged between us, a thread pulling tight from chest to chest. The bond, awakening. He tore his mouth from mine with a ragged sound, resting his forehead against mine, both of us breathing like we'd run for miles. "If we don't stop," he panted, "our wolves will finish this for us. And the next time we walk into the hall, every wolf there will smell it." My wolf pushed, hungry to close that last distance. I held her back with everything I had. "Not yet," I whispered, though the denial tasted like blood. "Let them see you choose me in the open. I won't be your secret." His fingers trembled against my neck. "You could never be a secret." "Then prove it," I said softly. "When we complete this bond, do it where no one can pretend it didn't happen." He was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded once, the motion slow and solemn. "Very well," he said. "We wait. But understand something, Ivy." "What?" My voice shook. He pulled back just enough to look me in the eye. "Whether our wolves have finished their work or not, whether the council approves or the realm riots." His thumb brushed my lower lip, still swollen from his kiss. "I am already yours." My wolf hummed in fierce agreement, finally settling. Behind him the maps waited. The borderlines hadn't moved, the enemies hadn't vanished. The kingdom still needed a king. But in that moment, in the war room that had taken so much from him, Levi had given me something no council could touch. He had knelt, and I knew, whatever battles came next, we would fight them together, or not at all. The summons went out at noon. By evening, the throne room felt too small for so many watching eyes. Torches burned high along the walls, their flames carving the carved wolves in shadow and light. Nobles packed the stone floor in a riot of furs and metals, the air thick with perfume, dominance, and curiosity sharpened into knives. Everyone knew something was coming. They just thought it would be an announcement tying their king to ironwood. I stood near a pillar at the edge of the crowd, hands folded so tightly my fingers ached. My wolf paced under my skin, not in panic this time, but in a tense, trembling readiness. She already knew. I could feel it in the way she pressed toward my heart, ears forward, tail high. The herald's staff struck the floor. "His Majesty, Levi Halvar, Alpha King of the 5 Packs." Levi stepped onto the dais in full black armor and dark crown, every inch the cold sovereign they were used to fearing. For a heartbeat, that version of him stole my breath. He looked untouchable. Then his eyes found mine in the crowd. The storm in them quieted. "Lords and ladies," he began, voice filling the hall, "you have been very loud in your demands for certainty." Soft laughter, all nerves and teeth. "You want proof that your king is still strong," he went on. "That grief has not hollowed him out. That he will secure your borders with the right alliances." Murmurs rose ironwood. Marriage, at last. The council believes that can only be done, he said, by binding me to a queen chosen purely for politics. His gaze swept the hall, unreadable. They are correct about one thing. This realm does need a queen. Harrow straightened, almost smug. Lady Corinne's lips curved. But, Levi said, his tone sharpening, it does not need a queen bought with fear. That cracked the room's certainty. The murmurs faltered. You want to know if I'm still capable of choice, he said. Of putting this realm first. So listen carefully. He took a slow breath, and when he spoke again, some of the iron left his voice. The strongest shield you can give a king is not another treaty. It is the one person who keeps his hands from shaking when he has to sign them. He lifted his bare left hand, no gauntlet, pale scars visible even from where I stood. I already have that shield, he said, and you've all been trying very hard to pretend she doesn't matter. A ripple of confusion ran through the crowd. Then he stepped down from the dais. Gasps scattered like startled birds as he left the throne empty and walked through the ranks of nobles, not toward Ironwood's delegation, not toward the council table, but straight through the center of the hall, straight toward me. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might be sick. Wolves turned to track him, some bristling, some stunned. My wolf went very still, watching him come with the quiet certainty of a tide rolling in. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my chin to meet his eyes. Ivy, he said, clearly enough that every ear could hear it. Silence dropped like a curtain. He didn't look away from me as he spoke. I came to your cottage because your scent calmed a wolf who hadn't known peace in 3 years, he said. I kept you here because your hands on my scars did more for this realm than any temporary alliance. You reminded me I am more than a crown. Corinne's voice snapped from the dais. Your Majesty, this is hardly... Levi lifted one hand, never breaking eye contact with me. The hall obeyed the gesture with instant quiet. For years, he said, I have ruled on duty and rage. It kept you safe. It also nearly destroyed me. You asked if I am still fit to lead. Here is your answer. I am in love with my Omega healer. The words slammed into the room like a thrown spear. A noble near the front choked. Someone else hissed under their breath. I heard my own name in a dozen different tones, shock, scorn, disbelief. Levi stepped closer, his voice steady but softer now. She sits with me when the nightmares come. She tells me when I am wrong, even when every wolf in this room is too afraid to. Her hands on mine keep me from becoming the monster you fear. His throat moved as he swallowed. No treaty has steadied your king as much as she has. Heat pricked my eyes. I tasted salt and smoke. He drew a breath that shook, just a little, and held out his hand, just like he had in my cottage doorway, with snow in his braids and grief in his bones. Only now his fingers trembled. I choose you, Ivy, he said, and the voice that had ordered armies cracked on my name. If you will have me. For one suspended moment, everything slowed. The flicker of torchlight, the rustle of heavy sleeves, the collective inhale of a watching court. All I could see was Levi, the man who had knelt in his war room, the wolf who calmed under my touch, the king who was baring his throat before his entire realm. My wolf pressed hard at my ribs, a push that felt like go. I stepped forward. Instead of just placing my palm in his, I caught his wrist, lifted his scarred hand, and pressed my lips gently to his knuckles. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Yes, I said, my voice clear despite the shaking. I will have you, king and man, broken and mending. Our fingers laced together. The bond didn't drift into place. It slammed. A shock like lightning cracked through my chest and his at once, a silent thunderclap no one else could hear but every wolf seemed to feel. My wolf howled with fierce joy inside me, launching herself toward his. His answered, deep and resonant, their voices intertwining until my knees threatened to give way. Heat flared from our joined hands, racing up my arm, settling behind my ribs in a warm, pulsing knot. I felt him, his fierce relief, his terror, his love like a second heartbeat inside my own body. Levi's breath hitched. His grip tightened, as if he feared the bond itself might pull me away. Gods, he whispered, too quietly for anyone but me. There you are. Wolves flinched throughout the hall, some lowering their gazes in instinctive respect. A few nobles turned immediately and strode for the doors, fury in every line of their bodies. Others stood frozen, faces stiff, minds clearly racing. Here and there, I spotted something else, tentative approval, curiosity, a weary kind of hope. Harrow's voice rang out. You would gamble the realm on this? Levi turned slightly toward him, still holding my hand. This is not a gamble, he said. This is a choice. You demanded proof that I am not ruled by grief or rage. Here it is. I chose not fear or convenience, but the one person who keeps your king sane enough to rule. You've thrown away a powerful alliance, Corin spat. I've forged a stronger one, Levi answered, gaze sweeping the watching wolves. You all say you want a king who will bleed for you. I am telling you now, I will, but I will not bleed alone. She, he squeezed my hand, is my anchor, my queen. You can learn to live with that, or you can leave. Some did. Cloaks flared as a small cluster of nobles stalked out, muttering about madness and ruined traditions. Others stayed, shoulders squaring, expressions grudging but resigned. The vast majority simply watched, weighing, recalculating, accepting the new shape of their world in wary silence. The realm did not crumble. The throne did not crack. Levi walked back toward the dais without releasing me. When we reached the steps, he didn't climb alone. He drew me up beside him, turning us both to face the hall. The torches hissed. The carved wolves stared. My heart beat in my throat. This is your queen, he said, not shouting, just saying it like a fact that would outlast all of us. Remember today when you speak of your king's weakness or strength. Remember that I did not bow to your fear. I bowed to her. My cheeks burned, but I didn't look away from the crowd. My wolf sat tall in my chest, tail curled around Levi's. That night, in his chambers, there was no council, no talk of borders or treaties. He kissed me like a man who had been holding his breath for months and could finally inhale. Slow at first, reverent, his hands framing my face as if memorizing it. Then deeper, his control fraying as the bond thrummed between us, pulling, never snapping too far. You are precious, he murmured against my mouth, against my jaw, against the pulse in my throat. Do you know that? Not because you're mine, because you're you. Every touch was careful and consuming at once, his thumb tracing the curve of my cheek, his nose nuzzling that spot beneath my ear that made my wolf hum. His forehead pressed to mine as if he couldn't quite believe I was real and staying. We didn't rush what came next. We had time now. Time to learn each other without secrecy, without court-imposed shame. For that night, we were content to drown in kisses and whispered confessions. Our wolves curled together in shared warmth, the world outside our door rearranging itself around our choice. Some nobles left the next day, taking their outrage and their banners with them. Most stayed. The realm held its breath, waiting to see what would happen to a kingdom ruled by a king who had dared to choose love in the open. Inside these stone walls, at least, we already knew. We were still very much here. Still intertwined fingers and shared glances across council tables. Still, midnight whispers and morning laughter. Still, impossibly, gloriously immersed in love. If you've read this far into Ivy and Levi's story, thank you for being here with them. Where are you watching from right now? What country or city? What was your favorite moment in this chapter, or the whole story? The kneeling in the war room, the public I choose you, or the first time their bond snapped into place?